WorldView. This is the place where we explore everyone's perspective on things that can burden our old worldview. Today we're discussing Eskom, South Africa, the economy, the impact of it all on the livelihoods, the energy, the security of South Africans. And we have in the room with us, Tebo and I are co-hosting this discussion tonight. We have Helga Cronier, we have Chris Yelland, we have Sukanati Manchancha. They will tell you. These are names that you see every day, pretty much, on South African media. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's kick off this discussion. There have been a lot of discussions about where it all started, how we all got here. But maybe today we should be talking about where do we go from here? How rotten is the apple, as it were, and what are the prospects of us coming out of this? Everybody around the world in Africa is making these silly comments about South Africa not providing electricity to its people. People are, small businesses and big businesses are suffering, especially those who cannot afford to buy additional sources or alternative sources of power, boosters, batteries, and that sort of thing. Perhaps let's give the stage first to Sikonati to tell us just 1-2 minutes about, do you see a bit of light at the end of this load shedding?
I see the irony there, sorry. Indeed, look, the reality is that South Africa will continue to suffer load shedding for quite a while. Stage 6 is quite extreme and really totally unacceptable. Eskom is totally aware of that and mindful of all the negative consequences that this causes. However, the reality is that in the absence of any generation capacity and in the face of these high breakdowns in Eskom's equipment, we will from time to time have to suffer load shedding. And Eskom really apologizes to the people of South Africa. I have to repeat this again, Sonny, that the reality of this country currently is that we will continue to have load shedding for quite some time yet, and until we have additional capacity in the region of 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts, only then may we be able to talk about possibly seriously reduced load shedding. Eskom on its side is doing what it can to add additional capacity within the regulations, and we will in the next few weeks be signing agreements with private investors who wish to invest in renewable energy from Eskom's current power stations, with the land that is available there, that has ready access to the transmission system. We have in the Mpumalanga area huge transmission capacity, particularly as the retired power stations are being decommissioned. So more capacity becomes available there. And the bonus, of course, is that this will not require a cent in guarantees from the taxpayer.
Okay, thank you, Senator Konasi. Let's hear from Chris Yelland and from Helga Cronier about your perspective of where things are, where we're going. Is Eskom, is government doing the right thing to get us out of this mess? And Sebo as well, of course, after Sebo is still there, yeah. So Chris, Helga and Sebo maybe.
I would agree with Sikonati that it's now time to talk about solutions and not dwell on pointing fingers of the past. Of course, we do have to hold people accountable, but right now we got to get on with the solutions and not get distracted by fruitless arguments about who is to blame. And I believe that there are solutions. If we do the right thing, there is a way out of this hole. And Sikonati has alluded to some of those things that we need to do. And I am absolutely confident that if we do the right thing, as other countries have shown us, we can get out of this. So just an example, and I think it's been well mentioned in the media, in Vietnam, last year, they installed 9,000 megawatts of rooftop solar PV and battery energy storage in the domestic and commercial space alone. That's just what can be done in the domestic and commercial space. We know that the Minerals Council of South Africa have talked about their members having a pipeline of some 6,000 megawatts of bigger projects. And the municipalities are also talking about projects totaling 2,000 megawatts plus. If you look at the major metros, just the 5 major metros. And so really, if you add this all up, I mean, Sasol is talking about installing 1,000 megawatts. Sikanati mentioned, they're going to market to look at generation capacity that exists in industry that could be brought to the grid through what is known as demand market participation. That's another 1,000 megawatts. You just add these things all up, and very soon you come to 15,000 megawatts, even more. And we can do this. And also, it can be done at very low cost to the fiscus, as Sikanati has pointed out too. The solutions really are going to come from the customers of electricity at their own costs, in their own interests. And this will relieve Eskom of a burden that is currently unable to meet. And by relieving Eskom of this burden, reducing the demand on grid electricity, load shedding will reduce for the whole country, so that individual customers installing systems for their own use will actually be helping the whole country. And really, that is the way forward, certainly in the next 2 to 3 years.
Do we have sufficient policy arrangement in place for all of this stuff to happen?
Well, I won't say we have sufficient yet, but I think there has been progress, and government is working on it step by step. I believe we could be working on it faster. I wish all government departments were aligned and speaking with a common voice. It's very disturbing to hear the mixed messages coming from government in regard to what needs to be done. And I think that is a sign of the problem ahead.
Helga?
Look, I think Chris has basically almost said everything. He even quoted the example of Vietnam that Solidarity quoted in its report that we released quite a while back about fixing South Africa's electricity problems. Our view is that the answer lies in the large-scale generation, by small generators. The small companies and individuals should generate. We should have solar panels on the rooftops of malls, small businesses, big businesses, people's homes. And that is how you will basically elude this problem. I think in saying that, we are not saying that the Eskom, should stop and should not exist, because I think some parties assume that is what it means. If you go to a system where there's private generation and state generation through a company like Eskom, that is where we are striving to get at. I don't think everybody is naive to think that we can exist without Eskom in the short term, at least. So there's definitely a need to fix things in Eskom, but to fix things in Eskom, you are going to need some sort of other generating capacity, which we don't currently have. There are definitely good policy changes that we've seen over the last few weeks or months. But I fully agree, it should happen very faster. If you sit in stage 6 load shedding, I think Mike Schuessler indicated that load shedding costs us 500 million per stage per day, so you can basically do the math to say what it costs our economy. So we definitely have to do something quick. And it's a problem. The fact that our government institutions and government departments don't speak the same language is a very big issue.
Right. Seppo, do you want to say something to that?
Yeah, look, it's fascinating that we are having this discussion. We keep switching from our mobile devices to Eskom, and I think there are some fascinating discussions that are beginning to take place when you see cabinet starting to talk, and they're talking about the board and whether this board can assist us going forward, and whether there should be a new board in the next week or so, from what we are starting to hear. And it's very difficult to have this discussion without talking about what has happened before.
and what continues to happen every day, the pain that business in South Africa faces, the pain that that small and medium enterprises face. The other day we hosted at Gibbs, I believe, a delegation from Houston, together with Invest SA, and they were here to do business with South Africa. And in the middle of that discussion, of course, the lights went off, and we were talking about investments, we were talking about the energy sector, and it went very, very dark. So the picture doesn't look good. And while there's a pressing need, I think, to have a talk about solutions as quickly as we possibly can, I think we need to start hearing that the people who are making the decisions, the individuals in the room, in that cabinet, or the emergency task team, and so on, that these are skilled people who actually know, and they can interpret information that engineers or the colleagues at Eskom are trying to tell us. Because if you have the 10 suppos in a room, all of whom don't have the basic understanding of what actually is happening, it may well be that we are talking to ourselves, and that people in the room don't actually have the basic fundamentals to interpret information and to listen to what the colleagues who are doing the work are telling us.
Right.
So it will be interesting to hear at a leadership level whether these things that we are hearing about a new board, and whether Skonati changing management, some people are calling for the CEO's head, but whether changing management and changing that board will actually see us moving forward. Because without the knowledge of whether the board understands the problem, we are not able to make sound decisions in our minds, at least at a perception level, as to whether we have capable people who can help us. So maybe if we hear from you about, whether we have people who actually understand what's happening in the room.
Yeah. Mr. Konati?
That sounds like
Okay, go ahead.
That sounds like an invitation for me to comment on the competence or otherwise of my bosses. Let me try. But Tshepo, I love what you said first, starting with the knowledge and experience at cabinet level. That's where you pointed at. Indeed, in the most progressive of countries, I'm talking now economically, we have engineers and accountants and lawyers leading the country. I shall not, Eskom shall not venture into talking about the competence of the shareholder. What we can talk about definitely is that the Eskom board should have 15 directors. It currently has only 6 non-executives and 2 executive directors. And the competence of the appointment of boards is the competence of the government through the relevant Department of Public Enterprises. And let me remind you, colleagues, I know you don't need the reminder, but viewers out there might need to. In the years up until 2010, 2011, Eskom's board always had the best that science could provide. And I'm not only talking about South Africans, it always used to have at least a North American, an Asian, and a European chief executives of electricity producing companies at the time. This changed in South Africa starting in 2010 when all competent people, particularly those that were practicing engineers and running electricity companies in the most developed economies, were removed from the board. But where we are now, the board only is a third of what it should be. And let's repeat again. So, Soli, you might want to inquire with the relevant minister what happened to the rest and when are we getting a new appointment. But Tshepo, you have also asked about executive management itself. Let me tell you, you're talking about the head of the chief executive. Since 2007, you have had enough heads of chief executives in your bag. And what has not changed is load shedding. You really need to start asking the correct question. Exactly what is wrong? The boards of Eskom have been changing every 3 years since Lynn Brown introduced something that she called board term limits of 3 years each, and it has only gone one way, and that is down to stage 6 now. And let's be frank here again. What really is the problem? You have had 13 chief executives in the last 14 years. What is the problem? You have had about 8 or 9 boards over the same period. What is the problem? So you can chop and change all you want. You will still not end load shedding if you do not do correct things that should be done.
So Gonatis, Eskom is in trouble, not just only, it needs to provide electricity to South Africans, to industry, etc., but it also has a huge debt, looking it in the eyes. Is it something like 500 billion rand? So how do you balance your focus? How does the organization balance its focus between trying to make up for that money that is lost, that it needs really, and providing electricity to South Africans in the short to medium term?
The debt in the up to the year ended March 2000, let's talk about September 2021, which is the last reporting period for which results are out, was 392 billion rand. And sorry, yes, definitely Eskom is in trouble on many fronts, including financially. But I can give you the assurance that the company is managed by specialists in the relevant areas, including in finance. The chief financial officer leads a huge treasury team that is bigger than the national treasury, and that is staffed with competent people. The reality is that as South Africa made choices over the last 20 years in building power stations, the infrastructure that we have, and borrowings had to happen. Now the government is seized with that matter, and I believe that Enoch Godongwana will answer that question about the debt in the medium-term budget statement. I repeat again, Eskom is led in the finance department by Caleb Kasim and his capable team, together with the treasury, and you do have all the relevant specialists and experts in their own fields amongst the 40,000 that work for Eskom.
Okay. Chris, I listened to a very interesting interview last week of the mayor of Cape Town, in outlining plans for Cape Town and probably the province of Western Cape to move as far away from possible from reliance on Eskom electricity. Actually, the Western Cape would like Eskom to hand over its infrastructure in the Western Cape so that it can upgrade it and get it to the point where it works, it functions to provide electricity in the Western Cape. Is that the way to go? Should there be a level of devolving of electricity responsibility generation throughout the country?
We often get distracted or by the current round of load shedding, which we know is getting worse year by year. But we must not forget that there is an equally big problem in the municipal electricity distribution industry. They are equally financially distressed. They have, resource issues. They have people issues. It is highly politicized, and they are performing extremely badly in general, with a few exceptions. And Cape Town is one of those exceptions. And I think the Western Cape more generally is in a better shape than in some of the other provinces and cities. If you would look at Free State, at the city of Bloemfontein or Mangaung, which has an electricity distributor called Sentlek, which is 100% owned by the municipality. It is in business rescue at the moment. And Sikanati will tell you the problems that Eskom face as a result of non-payment. We have a kind of a dysfunctional electricity distribution industry, and as many hours that we experience of load shedding, we experience more outages as a result of the poor performance of the municipal distribution sector, because there's a whole lot of other issues: theft and non-payment and overloading and cable theft and copper theft and vandalism, and as well as just the managerial issues that I alluded to. So, something has to be done, not only about Eskom, but something has to be done about the municipal electricity distribution industry if we are going to solve the problems. And I don't see at the moment any signs of readiness to deal with the municipal electricity problem. It's pushed down the road, and we're not seeing the kind of action that we are seeing at the generation level. And I think it's going to come back to haunt us in due course.
Yeah, but you haven't recommended. Maybe somebody else wants to, on the Western Cape. Should we follow the Western Cape, assuming that other municipalities can come up with the money or with ideas that are different to? Because it seems like there's a lot of politics at Eskom, or at least above Eskom, that's making it hard for the utility to do what it must, or to make the decisions that it needs to make, that it knows it has to make. Because sometimes we get the impression that between the president and the minister responsible for energy, there's not political, philosophical alignment in the thinking. So the Western Cape, which is governed by the DA, let's admit it. Is it because it's governed by the DA? Or is it because it's and they're doing the right thing, or is it because it has better infrastructure to do what it's doing for the people of the Western Cape?
If I can just come in quickly before other people may want to come in and answer your question, which I didn't answer before. In my view, I don't think it's correct to say that the city of Cape Town or the Western Cape are wanting to become independent of Eskom. What they really are wanting to do is they want to supplement their energy needs by alternative energy sources, in addition to the connection and the electricity they get from Eskom. It's a question of diversification, number one. It's a question of the desire to reduce one's carbon footprint of the province and the city, number two. And it's to try and obtain security of supply by having alternative sources. And lastly, it's to control and manage the price trajectory going forward, noting that municipalities, the biggest cost item by far in the municipal distribution business is the energy they buy from Eskom. So if they can, do some own generation or through IPPs, they can stabilize this price trajectory. It is in their interest. I think they are being responsible in looking after the interests of the citizens of that area. That is what governments are supposed to do. And I don't think they're just trying to become independent of Eskom or anyone else.
Okay. Harigard, what do you think? What do you make of it?
Yes. Look, I think they are trying to become less dependent, not independent. I think that's the point that Chris is trying to make, and sorry, my lights just went out. So the point is, I think it's a great idea. I think it should happen more. I think a lot more companies and a lot more communities should have the ability to take responsibility for their own power generation capabilities. I think there was a move to do something like that in Tshwane. It was executed less successfully, if I can state it lightly like that. But I think we should look at this more. I mean, it talks to what we've said earlier would be a solution. If people become less dependent on Eskom, it will give Eskom the necessary breathing space to look at itself and fix the things that needs to be fixed. I think the municipal distribution is an absolute mess, like municipalities in general. I mean, I don't think it's only the power distribution that's an issue. Municipalities is a mess all over, So I think there's a very big problem with that. And what we see is that communities start taking responsibility for themselves more and more as the government, fails more and more. And we will see that going forward. And we fully support that. If you are less dependent on government, you can look after yourselves. It basically enables you as a community. So we fully support that. I think one of the other issues that we've sort of been saying, but which haven't been fully summarized, is that the Eskom problem is bigger than one small thing. I think a lot of people look at Andre de Ruyter and say, no, his head must roll. I mean, Sikunati explained to us how many CEOs they've had over the last few years. it's not a solution because it's not the problem. There's people tend to want to look at it and simplify the problem, and then you don't address the actual larger problem. And I think there's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed. You sit with the corruption, sabotage, criminality within municipalities and within Eskom, and if you don't look at these things holistically, you will never find a proper solution, a holistic solution.
Yeah. Is there?
So the question of capacity coming, the call coming from the Western Cape, is exactly in response to what Eskom has been saying over the last 3 years. What South Africa needs is more generation capacity, and certainly those municipalities that can generate electricity should be able to do this without any delay. And the Western Cape has been leading. The other metros should be able to actually put their houses together and do this for the residents, the taxpayers, in order to protect their employment bases, in order to contribute to the national solution. Eskom is totally in support of this.
That's great. That's good to hear. Is there still room for nuclear? And Seppo, maybe you have. Is there room for nuclear? If you look at the mix, the energy mix, the IRP going forward, the last one was updated. Was it 2019? Are we still sticking to that, or has the environment changed to the point where it has to be updated every 2-3 years, right? So, what are we saying about nuclear?
Yeah, I think well, the experts need to help us to figure out this thing about balance, that you do need a degree of code to keep this work happening and to keep us to keep the lights on. But also, I think there's definitely space for nuclear, and importantly, there's space for the same policy language. When we listen to the Minister of Energy, and when we listen to the Minister of Public Enterprises, if he does say anything in recent times, at least about the problem that we are looking at right now, that we're discussing right now, if we are in the room and we're having that discussion, at least we would like to hear a sort of a common foundation at a policy level. But the problem is the one minister, they create a serious confusion for business, and business survives on predictability. One minute somebody says we want another version of Eskom, and then the next says, but we want to divide Eskom into 3 entities, and then the other one says nothing at all, except perhaps from time to time say that he's the executive authority for that portfolio. That is a serious problem, that between the 3 key people, the leader of the country, as in the president of the country, the minister accountable for energy, Minister Mantashe, and then the Minister of Public Enterprises, they are not singing definitely from the same hymn sheet. And by the time the experts get us closer to the reality about what needs to happen next and how soon we can solve the problem and what is the best possible energy mix, by the time we get there, the confidence in our ability to keep the lights on would have depreciated even further, and more foreign direct investment, more and more domestic confidence would have declined significantly, because we are not talking the same language, even if we come from the same political organization that now appointed the 3 of us to lead the energy conversation. And sometimes we are not even sure who's actually really, when you don't have, I think Chris made an important point, at some point when you don't have a leader, someone accountable, if you have too many chiefs in the same kitchen, you end up with problems. And that's where this communication mishap happens. Domestically, people want to also have confidence in the same way that investors want some confidence. And at the moment, the problem is right there at the top, at the policy level, that we're not even anywhere close to communicating the same language. It looks like every day somebody comes up with a new idea, and we must just, float with the wind as it goes along. And to that point, I would say maybe we need to ask a far more important question: is what's the energy mix? I can't ask how soon can this be solved, but at least what is the right mix, so that at least we're speaking to the same solutions and the same problems. And then we can talk about how soon and how long. Somebody said in about February or so, we're looking at level 8. Now you might say, or stage 8, you might say, but that's pessimistic. Let's look for more encouraging conversations. Unfortunately, South Africa is not feeling that optimism at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry, may I come in here? Because
Yeah.
I'd like to.
We are not talking to each other with the right, consistent information.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, Sally, I'd like to just pick up on one or two things that Chepa mentioned. The so-called energy mix, and the future role of coal and the future role of nuclear. And I just want to start off by saying I agree with Solly about this communications dissonance that we have and the mixed messages. And it seems to me the biggest mixed message is coming between the Presidential Climate Commission, which is in the office of the presidency by its nature, and the Ministry of Minerals and Energy. That is where the dissonance is. The public enterprise, as you rightly say, is somewhat silent on the issue, but this clash is happening between the presidency and the DMRE, in my opinion. In terms of the future mix, I am not one that is suggesting, and I don't know anybody who's rationally suggesting that we must end coal tomorrow. There is going to be a long future for coal in South Africa simply because of legacy coal. Why? Because 80% of all electricity in South Africa comes from coal. But let's now look about new plant. When we're talking about plant, we're not talking about switching off coal tomorrow, like immediately. There's a long future for coal. But when we're talking about new generation capacity, new coal is out of the question. Why? Because we have 80% coal in the mix at the moment, and that's too high. We don't need more coal in the mix with new generation capacity. We need less coal. We need to get our coal down to much lower levels over a longish period of time.
Right.
Let's now move to nuclear. Well, we know I'm one that does not, I'm not against nuclear for ideological reasons. I believe it's a safe technology. It's a low CO2 technology. And if you build it at the coast, it's a low water use technology. So it ticks some of the boxes. But you've got to keep in mind the boxes that it doesn't tick. It takes 10 to 15 years to build a nuclear power station. So it's not going to do anything for our problems for the next 10 to 15 years. We just have to accept that. It is the highest capital cost of all generation technologies, capital cost I'm talking about. And in a financially constrained country, that's important. What we need is low capital cost stuff, and we also need it to be delivered fast, and we also need it to be flexible in terms of being able to ramp up and down quickly in order to complement variable renewable energy, which is varying over time. And nuclear doesn't tick that box. Nuclear likes to run flat out, constant all the time. When we're talking about a future where we will have 30, 40 gigawatts of variable renewable energy, the very last thing we need is 2,500 megawatts of generation capacity that runs constant all the time. We need a significantly bigger amount of generation capacity that can ramp up and down to complement the variability of renewable energy. So nuclear, unfortunately, in my view, does not tick those boxes and is not part of the future, therefore. And that is not to say that I'm suggesting we should switch off Kuberg tomorrow. No, nuclear does have a future in South Africa. The existing legacy plant has a future. And that's why government, Eskom, is busy extending the life. I just wanted to...
So there shouldn't be, so there shouldn't be any discussion about nuclear new build anymore in South Africa, you're saying. And I think maybe you want to answer, when you respond to this as well, Chris and Helga, take into account the existing conflict, the war of Russia in Ukraine, the implications of it in terms of supply of oil and gas to Western Europe. Western Europe is running into South Africa and other countries looking for coal. So suddenly this commodity boost, we're selling a lot of coal out there. is it sustainable in the long term? Can we surely, as there's also the green agenda that you guys please comment on the green agenda, the impact of it all. Do we say, look, coal is our biggest source, we're going to keep it? I'm glad to hear you, Chris, saying, well, maybe for a period, but at some point we need to gradually switch on to other sources, renewable sources, for instance, cleaner energy sources. But what does it all mean for South Africa's decision making from today as we sit here going forward?
Well, look, going forward, there are much greater opportunities in jobs in renewable energy and battery energy storage than there are in nuclear and coal. If you look at the United States, which publishes very detailed employment statistics on different sectors, right now, and remember, renewable energies does not have a deep penetration in the United States, but even despite that, today, it is a fact that more people are employed in the renewable energy sector than in the entire coal and nuclear sector of the United States together, combined. And remember, the United States has a relatively high nuclear penetration and a relatively low renewable energy penetration. It just gives you an idea, that you must know as a fact that you're going to create jobs by having renewable energy and battery storage. You're going to create different kinds of jobs. You're not going to protect, forever coal jobs, but this is a slowly declining sector.
Okay, Helga?
Thank you, Solly. Look, I think one of the things that we should also take into account is the general age of the Eskom fleet. You look at the average age of 41 years, so it's not as if we've got plenty of years left if you take into account that, they estimated those things run for 50 years. So I mean, that leaves us with more or less 9 years in most instances, and it makes it a difficult situation. I think at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is, whatever we do, we should do it quickly, and I think the solution lies in solar and wind and all these alternatives way of producing and generating energy. And we need policies from government, a government that says the same thing, that supports private companies, private individuals to generate this capacity. I think it's a simple solution. I think Eskom is a difficult problem, but I think for the generating capacity, there are simple solutions. We should just start ignoring the politics surrounding it and start doing the work, and I think we should also start looking at training. As Chris explained earlier, there's a lot of jobs in the renewable energy. The question is, who's going to train and retrain individuals that have skills, that works at coal-fired plants or coal-fired plants? We should look at starting to retraining these individuals. Solidarity is definitely starting to look into changing the way we train these trades, and through Soltech, they are already discussing ways to train people in these types of skills. But I think everybody needs to do it. We need to find ways to work together as a country, and I think that's lacking at the moment. What we are doing is sitting around the table and pointing fingers at each other and threatening to take action in the streets, but we aren't talking about solutions. I think that's one thing that we should start stimulating more, is talking about the solutions, which we are doing tonight, which is pleasing.
Okay. Look, we should expect that people are angry. There are comments out there, people are still pointing fingers, and we should be pointing fingers maybe, but I totally agree that we should also direct our discussions towards finding solutions for the future.
Sorry, on the matter of solutions, let's just clear this part.
Right.
The discussion about technology mix or what technology we need to generate electricity is not going to be very long amongst smart people. The reality is, you cannot be discussing butter if you don't have bread. So let's just start there. What South Africa needs is generation capacity, and a lot of it. And we need, so as a base for the next 70 years, we've got at least 10,000 megawatts in the two power stations, the newest, Medupi and Kusile, that will serve South Africa for the next 70 years. So the decision has to be made as to whether those are the last or not. And I repeat again, if you do not have bread, you are not going to discuss butter.
Okay, makes sense.
Now,
Several-
with regards to, Elhad has just made a point about solidarity and retraining people. Only this past Friday, we went to the Komati power station, which is closing down at the end of this month. We went there to sign a memorandum of agreement together with the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Sabotage, which has agreed to open a training facility to retrain Eskom's employees at the Komati power station and those power stations that will be closing down in the near future. To actually do exactly what Elhad has just suggested here, we need to convert the current workers from coal artisans to renewable technology artisans. And as Chris has pointed out, this is the biggest employer, not just direct jobs at the power station, but in manufacturing as well. And that's what Eskom will be doing over the next 10 years, while 10,000 gigawatts of coal plant will be closing down due to retirement. You will be increasing the training and indeed the availability of renewables from that existing transmission infrastructure and from the communities that have supported the industrialization of South Africa through electricity over the past 100 years.
Okay, you've gone. Go ahead, Sebo.
Yeah, I'm looking at the comments. Note that South Africans are frustrated, and so and rightfully so. If you look at Munchal says Thabo Mbeki and his comrades decided not to go ahead with maintenance of the power stations in 2007. Hence, the declines began, and he says that accountability starts with him. Or he or she says accountability starts with him. And then there's a narrative that keeps coming up that if you are able to keep electricity committed for those who have, and those who have seem to have political power, it's a conspiracy theory perhaps or not, but it says in certain areas where important people live, power doesn't go out as much, and so someone says, I think the government should prioritize hospitals, schools, companies, universities while fixing these issues. There should never be load shedding on these institutions, meaning hospitals should never be in the dark, schools, education environments. I don't know how truthful it is that the certain environments are protected. Chris.
So Sekonati could tell us. Sekonati, it would be interesting to hear from you guys. Are you protecting some people? Are you choosing who decides? Okay, we're going to allow Heritage Day festivities to go ahead, and next day we'll switch them off again. Who makes these decisions?
Nice question. Let me tell you, load shedding is implemented universally across South Africa. There are only 3 areas that are exempt from load shedding, and this is according to the NRS regulation 098 by NERSA. Those are the seat of government, and the seat of government is the union buildings. The seat of government is the parliament building. By law, those 2 are exempt from load shedding. The third category of facilities that are exempt from load shedding are power stations that assist in the production of electricity. The example is a coal-producing power station that feeds Eskom coal. You cannot load shed that because then you will have no coal. And let's repeat, these are the regulations by NERSA, regulation on NRS 098 in the 2nd edition. So anyone can check that out. The last point I have to say about load shedding. So this is implemented by the distributors, the municipalities in the local areas. Eskom, of course, does have the ability to assist the municipalities to go do the physical load shedding in their areas. So if you are aware of any very important person who is exempt from load shedding, please direct your question to that relevant municipality and find out why and why that suburb is exempt. Insofar as the regulation is concerned, no private household, I'm talking now even about the president's official residence or any other residence, none is exempt from load shedding. only those customers who live or are fed by the same line that feeds a mine will fortunately be exempt from load shedding due to the fact that their line contributes to the production of electricity. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Do we still export electricity to neighboring countries? How much of it?
Yeah, we definitely do. The first point is that South Africa is a net importer of electricity. From Mozambique, we get 1,300 megawatts in the Kahora Bassa hydro scheme. And we then do export electricity to Zimbabwe and to Zambia. We expect to the utilities there, government-owned entities, ZESA. And we then export to individual customers in Mozambique. We export to individual customers in Namibia. I think there's one or two. So we import net about 400 megawatts. Chris probably is closer to those numbers than I am. And yes, before the next question that you are going to ask, are those accounts up to date? Absolutely, they are. They are all current, and there is no debt owed by those foreign customers.
So our contractual obligations to those contractors, to these contracts, are they such that when we in serious dire straits in South Africa, we must still continue to give them electricity, or do you guys have the flexibility to say, guys, sorry, this weekend we can't because we really need it here at home?
In our supply agreement with Zimbabwe, there are two agreements or two contracts, the same with Zambia. And of course, I should have mentioned there are a few companies in Botswana, mining companies. In our supply agreement with the countries there, we have a firm contract, which is the same contract you and I have. You get a certain amount of electricity and you pay for that. And they are treated like every other customer. Then there's the second contracts for Zambia and for Zimbabwe, where the utilities there require additional capacity. It's called a non-firm contract. Eskom can only supply that contract when it does not have capacity shortages at home. So as soon as load shedding is declared in South Africa, that part of the contract falls away and they do not receive any electricity. I must also tame your exuberance though, Soli, and say that these are really minor amounts of electricity that are supplied to these countries.
Yeah, look, these are important things to address because people keep asking these questions. And no matter, I listen to a lot of your interviews to Skonite, and I know that you always repeat some of these answers, especially the need for more generation capacity. I hear you. It's very much constant to the coffee mill. But, sometimes you have to keep saying these things so that hopefully more people hear them. Let's talk about base load going into the future. Is there still space for a discussion about base load, Chris, Helga?
If I can come in on baseload, because it's a perennial issue that I think needs to be dealt with, and we allow a lot of misinformation and fuzzy thinking and talk about baseload, and it should not be something of great argument. It's very straightforward. Firstly, just to say that in the old days, and I don't mean that long ago, coal was the cheapest way of producing electricity, and therefore it made sense to run a coal power station continuously because it was the cheapest. And secondly, coal power stations do not like ramping up and down. They like to run constant at their best efficiency level. And then you had mid-merit generation, which is stuff that comes on during the working day, and you had peaking plants just for the short peaks. And that was the way power generation was done for the last 90 years, except that the world has changed in the last 10 years dramatically. Coal is no longer the cheapest solution, and therefore it does not make it sense to run it all the time continuously. The cheapest energy at the moment, comes from wind and solar PV, and therefore it makes sense to run those as hard as you can, as long as you can, and take as much renewable energy as you possibly can get, because it is the cheapest source of energy today.
And storage for those?
Yeah, but the question is, it is a variable source of energy. It is the cheapest, but it is variable. and demand for electricity doesn't match the profile of the variable wind and solar. So when you use wind and solar, you cannot just use it in isolation. You have to use it in combination with flexible generation that can fill the gaps in the variability. Now, the things that can fill the gaps in that variability are not nuclear and not coal, because as I mentioned to you, nuclear and coal like to run flat out all the time. So it doesn't help to have coal and nuclear running at a constant output. It doesn't attend to the variability. So what you need to do is you need to be a taker of the cheapest energy you can possibly get, and then you need to put in flexible generation that can ramp up and down to fill the gaps. And this is the new paradigm that has only come about in the last 10 years. And the answer is really simple, that a blend of wind and solar, which is variable renewable energy, combined with flexible generation in the form of battery energy storage, pumped water storage, and hydropower, and other emerging storage technologies, can deliver 24-hour reliable, dispatchable power. It's not base load, but it is reliable, it is dispatchable, because it is a blend of three technologies that complement each other. And the trouble is that if you put in nuclear and coal, it no longer complements the cheapest source of electricity, which is wind and solar. So I hope that gives an idea that the old paradigm has been turned on its head. But dinosaurs refuse to change.
Okay, that's the question. The question was, who is a dinosaur? Is it the thinking? Is what Chris has just said consistent to current day thinking within Eskom, Sikonathi?
The thinking at Eskom, I have already said that, Solly, and I said to you, the debate about technology is not going to be very long amongst smart people. You need capacity and you need a lot of it. At this point, you cannot get any funding for coal. We have coal for the next 200 years in this country. South Africa has to make a decision about how we exploit that coal, including whether we need to exploit that coal going forward, given what Chris has said. Definitely, this country needs a whole lot more capacity than it currently has. Look at a country such as Taiwan. In 2010, it had the same amount of capacity as generation capacity as Eskom. Today, Taiwan has got double. Why are we still stuck at 40,000 megawatts? That, for me, is the reality. And by the way, Elkhart mentioned the average age of the power stations. Please add another 3 years there. This year, the power stations are 44 years of age, and the operating life of the coal power stations is 50 years. So you will be closing down at least 10,000 megawatts over the next 5 years. And what are we replacing it with? With talk, with discussion, with debate? Over to you, sir.
Okay. Helga?
Thank you, Solly. Yeah, look, I think I want to latch onto what Sikonathi has said just now. What we've seen in our government is that there's a lot of talk and discussion. I mean, I've sat in so many sector master plan sessions, especially in the defense and aviation industry. And what one sees is great plans. What you don't see is any execution at all, and I think that's one of the problems that we do have is there's a lot of talk, especially in government circles, and a lot less of doing, and I think that's one of the things that needs to change if we do want to solve the problems that we sit with, is that we need to take action. We can discuss a problem, but somebody needs to go home or go to work and do the work, and I think that's the issue. I think, what Chris has explained in terms of baseload, it basically takes us back to the fact that there needs to be an energy mix. It's a fact, we will not get around it. Sikonathi says this, the smart people will solve the problem quickly. The question is, how do we take the less smart people out of the discussion, to let the smart people finish it and enable people to do the work, because I think that's what needs to happen. We discuss it and there's a lot of politics and a lot less doing, and that's the point. I think we know that there should be an energy mix of some sort. How that looks, I leave to the smart people. I'm not one of them. And I think we should stop doing politics when we speak about Eskom, and we should start talking energy, you know, and I think that's the biggest issue.
Right. Sebo, comment?
Yeah, look, there's an opportunity somebody has just asked whether there's space to have a discussion about fossil fuels. And maybe Helgat, you can take it away.
Well, that's coal. You know, that's basically we have a lot of coal. Sekonati has just said for the next 200 years, really, isn't it? And but the question is, there are political decisions that have to be taken in line with the global agenda, as it were. I mean, we don't know what was said. There's a lot of rumor already making the rounds about the discussion between President Ramaphosa and Biden out there, what the G7 is wanting to do with coal, helping South Africa give money to South Africa or loan money to South Africa to invest more in renewables over time. But people are saying, wait a minute, why should we be indebting ourselves when we have what we need here, which is coal? But then coal is clashing with the whole green agenda. It's a difficult one. It's a political decision or discussion at some point, but the South Africans are really just want electricity. They just want to know that when they wake up, when they go to the office, when they work at home, there will be power. And Sekonati says, look, I've been calling, and I've discouraged to your credit. I've heard you. I don't know if you're speaking more to South Africans than to your bosses many times when you repeat these things, that we need more generation capacity. Do you see movement? Is there hope?
Well, we now have the government family coming into the party with the announcement that the interventions that Cyril Ramaphosa announced during July and what Gwede Mantashe has to do in terms of the amendment to the Electricity Regulation Act, Section 34, I think, in Parliament. So those are as a result of Eskom's shouting for the last 3 years. And this is what we are good at in South Africa. We talk about it. We were promised that 3 years ago there would be an emergency procurement of electricity capacity. There is still not a single megawatt coming from that emergency program that was announced 3 years ago after Eskom formally made a request for government to bring in 4,000 megawatts. That need has now increased to 6,000 megawatts. And I have at least 3 times here told you that we will close down 10,000 megawatts of capacity. Whatever action the government has taken is falling far short of the need. Because it will take whatever power station you decide to build baseload, it will take at least 5 years for that capacity from the start, not from the talk, from the actual start of construction to bring any capacity online. So yes, government is coming to the party. However, Eskom does insist that we need a whole lot more capacity. The power stations, as you can see, we're all sitting in the dark today, and that's due to 44-year-old power stations that have had nobody to invest in them. And actually, even at some point by political instruction, maintenance has had to be neglected. And that is where we are now today, stage 4, and we've come down from stage 6. Do we want to be having this discussion again in the next 5 years? Do we want to be still debating technology in the next 5 years? Or do we want to move the country forward and ensure growth by bringing infrastructure? You don't get growth first, you get infrastructure before.
Yeah. Okay, gentlemen, we let's give ourselves about 6 more minutes before we finish. But I have one question, which is, we haven't spoken about sabotage and criminality. I mean, under the rate refers quite a lot to all the wrong contracts that continue to go to the wrong people, or sabotage of infrastructure. We know that sabotage of Eskom infrastructure around the country is happening. How big is that a problem? How much does it contribute to the current load shedding issues we have?
Sorry, I believe Chris might be even more of an objective person here, but I'll tell you that Eskom has reported what it has. Let's be clear here. We should not be trying to find excuses for our own failures as Eskom. Where we have evidence of sabotage, we have reported that to the police and publicly told you, the people of South Africa. And that's as far as it goes. In order for us to continue doing our jobs and be taken seriously by the people, we need to concentrate on the problem at hand, and that problem currently is lack of capacity. Chris might be able to tell you from an independent objective what he thinks the level of sabotage is.
Okay,
Well,
Chris.
if I can just say that it's not just me, or it's not me that's saying this. It is in the president's plan. If you look at the president's plan that he announced a couple of months ago, dealing with criminality and sabotage is high in the list of, it's one of the action areas. There's a so-called emergency crisis committee has been established, and one of the work streams is dealing with the question of criminality. So it is on the agenda. It is one of the issues being looked at. But this is not only an Eskom. I want to go back to the municipal sector. The criminality in terms of cable theft, electricity theft causing overloading, aluminium theft, steel and copper theft, vandalism, of all different kinds in the municipal sector, that level of criminality. And by the way, the criminality in terms of corruption in the municipal sector itself, is as big, if not a bigger problem than Eskom. So we mustn't only look to Eskom, and what has happened there. It's happening everywhere, and it needs to be dealt with at a very high level and taken seriously. It's impacting on every one of our lives, and in terms of the outages that we experience every day, both at Eskom level and at municipal level.
Right. Helga Tsepo, can I allow you to say a few words before we're going to finish? And then
Yes, Solly, please. Look, I mean, the fact of the matter is criminality is a huge issue. I think one of the problems with it is that people tries to put it in boxes to say sabotage is a big issue. The next time we hear about corruption is a big issue. Just as Chris has explained now, it's a huge issue, but it's criminality in general. We sit with corruption, you sit with sabotage, you sit with the corruption issues within the procurement system that are largely connected to black economic empowerment because people use those policies to inflate prices. That's as good as a criminal act, it's corruption as a matter of fact, So I think it's a very big problem. And it seems as though we in government lack the capability to deal with it sufficiently. The fact of the matter is, if you look at the South African Police Service, they are in as big a mess as Eskom. We don't report on it as much because they don't switch off our lights. But the fact of the matter is, the high crime rate points to it. In our union, we sit with promotion issues, which speaks to the root cause, which is cadre deployment within the South African Police Service, to such an extent, that we end up with a lot of black members that come to us and say, "But I'm not getting a job," and based on the fact that somebody else is politically connected, and it's a big issue. So the question remains: how will we deal with this criminal side of it if the police, which is the institution which needs to deal with it, sits with basically the same issues? So it's a very big problem, and it definitely needs attention.
Okay, so we have a new board coming in apparently next week. I saw the headline earlier. We have a current board which is not complete, which doesn't have all the skills needed required to have the Eskom turn around. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen, Sekonati? Do you think it's going to be a wholesale change of the board, or is it just an addition of people who will bring the kind of skills that are hopefully finally required and necessary to help us be able to say to South Africans there is a bit of light beyond these load sheddings? I mean, we need to say something positive.
Sorry, I will allow you and your colleagues to do the speculation. We will deal with facts at Eskom. The fact is, you only have 6 members, 6 non-executive directors on a board that should have 15. And you don't need to be too smart to realize that you need additional board members. Whether you call that a new board or old board, I don't know how you define that. The reality is you need additional members. And I'm not so old as to be the only one that should remember on this panel that Eskom always used to have leading electricity producers from Europe, from North America, from Asia, As non-executive directors, those were chief executives of companies in the UK, in Germany, in America, in Canada, in Japan, in China, part of the Eskom board all the way up until 2011 when it was really downsized. And we then now we know what was being cooked. You only need to read the Zondo Commission report. Right. We know what was being cooked when all those capable people were removed, including capable people here in South Africa were removed from the board. So if the new announcement that you are talking about, which I have not seen and am not confirming, if it comes, it better be to actually restore confidence and skill at board level for it to be effective.
Okay.
Can I come in here, Solly, quickly, just to say, I think we must caution about thinking that, a change in the board is going to suddenly make dramatic difference to the situation we find ourselves in. We've got to understand what a board is. It's there to provide oversight over the executive and the policy issues. It's a governance thing. And Eskom is run not by the board. Eskom is run by the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the head of generation, the head of transmission, the head of distribution, the head of human resources, and the head of corporate services. They run Eskom. And changing the board doesn't change the underlying problems. It may change the way in which people look at the problem, but we still have to do the work to solve the underlying issues and the problem. And we should not think that changing the CEO tomorrow is going to solve the problem. And the same applies to the board. This is not a one-man business. It's not a 15-man business or woman business. It's a 40,000 people business. And it's the people and the executives and the middle management that can change this company. The board is important for oversight, but it's not going to make a change tomorrow.
Sabo, I know you need to run to a radio interview. You want to say one word before you run off?
Yeah, I think we need accountability amongst the three that I was discussing, that they need to start speaking the same language and doing so consistently, so that at least and help the country to remove the bottlenecks, because Eskom also has to go through a lot of bottlenecks to get its job done. If you declare this a crisis and a disaster that it is, then you should make it easy for Eskom to take the right decisions and build this capacity that Skonati is talking about. Thank you so much.
Helga, do you have your last word, or can I just anything else? Anything that you feel you need to say, guys, before I go?
I just want to say one thing. Sorry,
Helga first, and then Chris.
Helga.
Solly, I think just one lasting comment regarding the criminality within Eskom. The one thing that we have experienced is that it's a lot more difficult to get whistleblowers in Eskom to come out. And I say this because I've gone through the same process at Denel as an example, which just basically shows that they are much better organized within Eskom. Which is a concern. And what Chris has said about the board basically led me to this thought, the problems within Eskom is deep-rooted, and changing a board won't change this type of culture of criminality within Eskom, so that's a big issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Chris?
Sorry, my closing word is that it's very easy to get in a state of despair and feeling that we are helpless in the face of these problems. We are not helpless in the face of these problems. These problems can be solved. We can end load shedding in 2 to 3 years. We've just got to do the right thing. Thank you.
Mr. Konati, your parting words?
The reality is, yes, this is a problem that has been man-made, and it can be solved, and it can be solved by South Africans. All of us can, and we need to pull our hands together, and we really need to hold people accountable, starting, of course, with the executive management of Eskom, and it goes all the way up. I will repeat this again. You have been changing boards and management and everybody. What has not changed is the problem of load shedding, and we all know how easy it is to solve. It really is. Build power stations, allow the technocrats to do what they should do with maintenance. Stop prescribing that you go get the cheapest spares, which have done what we are getting now. You really need the original equipment manufacturers who built these machines to go back and make sure that they are maintained properly the way they should be. But most importantly, the power stations are 44 years on average, and they will be closing down at age 50.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, gentlemen, it's very hard to have a conversation about Eskom because there are so many conversations, so many articles written about this, and so much commentary. And Sekonati, sometimes I feel your pain. I think your frustration because you have to be explaining all the time. But South Africans want to know. There's a lot of speculation out there about the politics behind it all. People are asking, are these people serious? Can they take the race thing out and get the right people to just get the people who know, who were part of constructing this, at least if they're still alive, or who have the skills to put this thing, to make sure that it does what it does for South Africa. South Africans in the end don't care about the skin color or the political views of the person behind the machinery, as long as they make the machinery do what it must for the economy, for South Africa, for livelihood. Right now, it's not the case, and we really need to get to a point where we can say we are finally getting there. So, gentlemen, this is one discussion. There's going to be many, hopefully, and hopefully the next one will be one applauding Eskom for steps it would have taken to get South Africa out of this. For those of you who've been commenting on the chat line, comment line, thank you very much. Thanks for following WorldView. Thank you, gentlemen, for our guests, to our guests for having come to join us. And please continue sharing our platform out there. Get people to know more about it, subscribe to it, and give us your views about what else you think we should be talking about, not just for the sake of talking, but to hopefully contribute to making South Africa a better place. For me, this is Solimwe at WorldView. Thank you, guys.